As Kate said, I'm Carla Januska. I'm the creative director at Go East, so I lead creative strategy here, and we're really excited to talk to you today about content and creating rich content for brands.
Yes, I'm Jennifer Manion. I'm the creative strategist. So I help to evaluate and plan for and create content with the digital team for our digital projects. So as way of an introduction, I would like to mention a few things that we hope we can give you this morning. So essentially, we would like to inspire you to think differently about content. Okay, now what this means is that we would like you to think about how to build brand awareness differently, how to build brand loyalty differently, and how to establish and maintain marketplace prominence in a different way. We'd like to inspire you to think about how to motivate customers, not just to purchase your products, but to become brand advocates. We'd also like to inspire you to think differently about how, when, why, to whom, and what you communicate about your products to the people who are interested in them. In essence, we'd like to inspire you to embrace creativity, to come up with some really, really big ideas, and to plan for and create some rich content. So we're going to offer you some inspiration. We've got some statistics, a few examples to illustrate what we mean. We also have a tool for you to take away as you're thinking about preparing for your next big launch of content. So of course, the big question now is why care about content at all? Well, human beings, you and I, are meaning-making creatures, right? We're always trying to figure out, make sense of ourselves, our relationships with other people, our experiences in the world. And one way in which we do this is seeking out information, right? And these days, we're not just going to the newsstands, we're not just going to the library, but we're going online to find out that information. So we're going digital. And on a typical day, so every day in the US, about 59% of all adults 18 and over are online. They're doing all sorts of things. And these are some things that you might be interested in. So 59% are using search engines. People are on social networks. They're looking for product information before they purchase. They're doing research, they're watching videos, they're researching on Wikipedia, they're tagging online content, they're reading blogs, yours, mine, your friends, and they're posting comments and product reviews. So how many people is that 59%? Well, in August of 2011, it was precisely 139,717,815 adults. Right? So that's nearly 140 million adults, 140 million people. That's a really, really big beast. So what are they doing, right? They're searching, they're trying to verify information they know, they're trying to find information that they don't, right? And that 140 million people, even 4% of that is a really big number. That 4% who are making comments about your products, right? That is 5,600,000 people. That's larger than the population of Denmark. And for your Norwegians, that's totally bigger than the population of Norway too, right? So what does this have to do with content, let alone what we're going to be calling rich content? Well, the information that those 140 million people are looking for, right, whether it's a video on Vimeo of a new creative filmmaker that they've discovered, or whether it's weather statistics on weatherchannel.com, or whether it's a white paper of an industry in which they're interested, all of that is content. Right? So the American Heritage Dictionary, us nerds love dictionaries, defines content in a way in which we would all recognize, right? It's those things which are contained in something else, right? So the coffee in your cup, right, the contents of your cup. More abstractly, the content of this talk is ideas about content. Right? Interestingly, though, the American Heritage Dictionary now has another definition of content, and that's information that is on a website or other digital media. And that's what we're interested in this morning, content in that meaning. Now, way back in the early days of websites, like in the early 1990s, remember then? The word content wasn't used for the stuff that was in a website. And when it did come into use, it referred mostly to the words on the page, right? The written or editorial content. And it's still used that way today, right? So content in digital media is words, and words are content. But we're not just talking words on websites as we traditionally conceive them. Content includes words on all sorts of new outlets, including blogs and vlogs. That is a Tumblr blog of IBM. IBM has a Tumblr blog. It's a visual blog, and it's actually really, really good with awesome images and information. But it's also words on Twitter feeds and Facebook pages, microsites. Right, there's Oreo's Facebook page and a microsite by Procter & Gamble for girls. Product reviews, right? All of those have words. Other things, though, that we might not think too much about also are important in terms of content. Customer support, online chats, right? Words, e-newsletters, tons of words. Downloadable apps have words. Mobile alerts have words. Digital signage has words, right? So content is words, but it's so much more these days, right? It is video and animation, graphics and audio. All of this counts as content. So in essence, content involves all of those different elements, sometimes alone, but much more effectively in combination with one another, in ways that communicate meaning, right? That convey meaningful information. And content is what internet users go online to look at, see, listen to experience, and ultimately to share, right? So the gist, well, people as individuals or as representative of organization and businesses, when they put stuff on the web, they are publishers. You are publishers when you do this. And we have to start thinking thinking like publishers think, right? There's lots of sources of information. Some of it is richer than others, and we want to encourage you to think about how you can make your content rich.
So one of the reasons we're so enthusiastic to talking with you about rich content are the new demands on brands, right? So millennials, technology, new platforms, demands. It's all new. It's a new world, new game. Traditional solutions are becoming less and less effective, and everyone knows brands need new ways to engage. However, and I know you know this, brand identity is broader than your logo, right? It's more than your tagline, it's more than your trade dress. Identity is important. You have to communicate clearly and consistently across all platforms so people know who you are. However, today, what I think is really exciting are the opportunities for brands to engage in new ways on these different platforms. And so what we have been excited to talk to you about are how we can make this happen. So, you know, what are the new demands on brands? What's changed? And you probably know a lot of this, but everyone tells the brand story. So social media has changed the game. I think it's interesting, our friends in PR are really doing fantastic jobs of really thinking about both pull and push in terms of communicating what the brand needs to communicate in real time. Multi-channel, of course, means multi-everything. So we can't do communication silos anymore. We can't say one thing in one channel and one to another. Everything has to be repurposed over and over again. The story can change in a minute. And the demands, I mean, everyone knows and recognizes the pace at which communications happen today. I'm sure many of you know the story about what happened last month with the Susan G. Komen Foundation for the Cure. So there couldn't be a better brand identity out there. They own the pink ribbon. They own the words, the cure. And to have watched, and so if you didn't know, so they made a decision to stop funding Planned Parenthood's breast health examinations, and a furor ensued. And within 48 hours, they rescinded the decision. And one brand strategist said, as the undisputed leader in breast cancer awareness and fundraising, Komen and its signature pink ribbon established a rock-solid identity. Yet much of their credibility, 30 years in the making, was wiped out in an astonishing 48 hours. And it remains unclear whether that damage can be undone. So I think that as people who contribute to brands and build brands, the idea that if you don't respond in real time, in a real way, 30 years of equity and awareness could be impacted. And then finally, legacy equity might not be such a benefit anymore. So long-term brands are looking to reinvent themselves and reinvigorate. We know we need to be engaged in contemporary marketplace in new ways. And actually, it's so interesting. So this is the JCPenney spring catalog. I don't know if you got it. I did, and I was super impressed. So JCPenney is reinventing itself. that has all new management from Target and Apple, and they are picking up the creative currency that people, users, have associated with those brands. They picked up their creative currency and they're associating it with JCPenney. And I find it fascinating that they're doing it not only in communications, but they're doing it internally and they're doing it in store. So Ron Johnson, who's the CEO, said our biggest enemy is our way of thinking. So he's trying to shake up how they think about themselves in the brand. And then his goal, which I think is really interesting, is to make the store a place for people to love to come to, a store that is more than a store. And when we think about a store that is more than a store to people, we have to think about the brand in new ways. Oh, and this is a great shot of an extra site, a mini site, where JCPenney is presenting their change to people over and over. And it again shows how they're leveraging new creativity to really change up a brand that's over 100 years old. So we believe, this is one of the biggest revelations to us, is realizing that brands need to be part of the culture, not the marketplace. So the marketplace is part of the culture, not the other way around. And so if you want to engage with people, you need to be engaged in the culture itself. So it's interesting because Americans have a deep desire to engage with brands beyond product, right? Because brands have multiple layers of meaning. They're deep. They have deep associations for people. People drop brand names and hip hop songs and they get mashed up and placed on sitcoms. And it's not just because of product placement. It isn't, it can't be. No one is going from a sitcom to purchase, right? But the brand association, the mashing up of the brand and the culture is what's exciting and relevant, because then the brand is engaging with you in your everyday place and space. And I think brands really need to share. I mean, sharing is language that's coming out of social media, but it's really impacting marketing and communication. So according to a recent survey by trendwatching.com, most people would not care if 70% of brands ceased to exist. That's so sad. I mean, don't you think that's sad? I mean, I don't know, and they follow up by saying that inflexible brand corporate facades jar with consumers who live online, where communications are immediate, open, and raw. And what's more, people openly broadcast and share their lives online, and thus brands are increasingly being expected to do the same. And I think that is just fascinating. I expect brands to act like me. So to do this, to be part of the culture, we have to know what that means. So culture is how people act. It's how they create. What we create becomes the culture. And if you want to think about participating in culture, we believe you have to think about being creative. You have to create. Creativity is the engine of growth, right? To create, you grow. So things have shifted quite a bit in the marketing communications world, in the marketplace itself, and in the culture. And Daniel Pink, in A Whole New Mind, said, "The future belongs to a very different kind of person, a person who creates and empathizes, the pattern recognizers and the meaning makers. These people will reap society's richest rewards and share its greatest joys." And we believe brands are the same. Brands need to be the same. They need to be empathizers. They need to be creators. They need to be meaning makers. And the more we do that, the more the brand communicates in novel ways by creating content, the more people will create the deep, rich associations so that they'll care that the brand does not disappear, right? People quote taglines. They forget that that came from a commercial. 5-second rule, right? They tag brands, they like brands, they pin brands, they become their mayor, right? So this is the kind of engagement that I think content gives us an opportunity to create in the culture. So that makes marketers, I think, the new Medici. So the Medici, in case you didn't know, were a 14th century Italian banking family, and they basically created humanism, the Italian Renaissance. They did it. They hired Michelangelo and Leonardo to create art and different kinds of cultural artifacts to build their brand. They built a cultural legacy so deep that 500 years later, we still associate all of the culture of one of the most flourishing parts of Western history with that family, right? And so the family as brand, it's a metaphor for us as marketers today. So brands that can create and leave a lasting impression, 500 years is quite a timeline, I realize. But, you know, I think this idea of creating content and culture so that it impresses and engages everyone who comes in contact with it is what we can aspire to be. If the brand can bring joy, not the product, but the brand can bring joy. It has a vision to contribute to the culture. You can leave a lasting impression because things you create become part of the culture. And you know, you might say, oh, wow, that's super aspirational, as I am. But I want to share with you Coca-Cola's current business strategy for using creativity and content. I don't know if you have seen this or not. I'm just going to play the first minute of it.
Content 2020, how the Coca-Cola Company will evolve its approach to the creative agenda on its key brands. We will move from creative excellence to content excellence. Chapter 1. How does content excellence approach liquid and linked content development? The purpose of content excellence is to create ideas so contagious they cannot be controlled. We call this liquid. And these ideas are so innately relevant to our business objectives, our brands and consumer interests, we call this linked. And through the stories we tell, we will provoke conversations and earn a disproportionate share of popular culture.
So, I love this. Earn a disproportionate share of popular culture. They want to double business by 2020. And their strategy to do this is to create enough content that they earn a disproportionate share of the culture.
So we're not just talking about content, right? We're talking about rich content. What do we mean, right? Is some content rich while others isn't? And of course, you know, in our opinion, the answer is a big, big yes. So to try and make sense of what it means for something to be rich, for content to be rich, let's start with a metaphor. So fun. So by rich content, we mean content of the sort, involves all the elements that we talked about before. It's content that satisfies an audience the way in which a really, really good meal satisfies a diner, right? And you've all experienced this. So it leaves people with a sense of fulfillment, maybe a little bit of wonder of like, what's in there? How did it have such depth? Or why am I still thinking about that sauce? And it also leaves people with a taste for more, right? You want to make another reservation. So by rich, right, I'm going to extend these metaphors a little bit further. I'm going to mix them up. So by rich, we mean rich in the way in which rich soil, right, is fertile and productive and fruitful. The way in which rich wine is full-bodied, it's robust, it's multi-layered, right? The way in which rich colors are strong and they're intense and they're vivid. Or a rich voice at an opera performance, for example, is sonorous, right? It's rich, it's full, it's resonant. Or the way in which a rich supply of something is abundant, it's bountiful, it's ample, right? That's what we mean by rich. It really is what we mean by rich. There it is. It's so rich. Okay. So a little bit more concretely, rich content establishes a relationship with customers that is, first of all, collaborative. Secondly, it's narrative about the brand. It's not just descriptive about a product, right? It's significant to the lives of people who are interested in it and who are loyal to it. So it adds value. Right? And finally, it's multi-channel. So these are the criteria that we're identifying with rich content. We thought it might be helpful to imagine a spectrum of content. I'm going to see if I can walk around a bit. So on one end, down at this end, we have what we call functional content. And way at the other end, we have what we are calling engagement content. right? And so down here, right, the content does what we need it to do. So it informs, it describes things, we get features and benefits and that sort of thing. And as we move up the spectrum, we start to get a little bit more complicated information that validates, it educates. Ooh, it's starting to engage me intellectually, I'm interested in this, convincing me of something, aha. Finally, we're moving into raising awareness. We're starting to tell a story. And suddenly, we're moving into the territory of rich content. The content's entertaining. It's engaging me emotionally, not just intellectually anymore. It inspires me. It's sparking conversations. I'm talking about this. I'm telling people. I'm blabbing all over the place. And it's motivating action. I'm doing something. So rich content, right? What does it do? It's impressive, right? It advances your business goals while meeting the needs and wants of your audience. So it knows who the audience is, what they want, how they speak, where they go, how they behave, what they eat, who they speak to, that sort of thing, right? It reflects and conveys your brand promise and values. So it's building and communicating your brand's personality, right? So it's recognizable. And it builds and maintains a story about why your audience should find you credible and should think that you'd satisfy them in the way in which they really want to be satisfied. In the words of content strategist Colleen Jones, super smart, this is content that helps you, what she says, achieve clout, right? So clout, power, and influence. This is what she has to say. This is from a really helpful resource, her book, Clout, The Art and Science of Influential Web Content. So she says, clout allows you or your organization to attract the right people and at the right time change what they think or do. Clout isn't achieved with only a quick trick, a personalization feature like, hello, Jane, insert name here. How many times have you had that, right? It doesn't work with a sexy design or just one tweet or a campaign blast. Rather, clout is the outcome of publishing what Jones calls influential web content. We're calling rich web content during lasting relationships with people. And this is really critical. This thinking demands sophistication and substance, time and creativity. So, a brand with rich content that establishes clout enjoys the trust and respect of its loyal fans, and earns credibility and authority in the marketplace, right? And consumers really, really want this. So let's look at a couple examples of rich content so you get a sense of what we're talking about. I want to start with Cisco. This is a global B2B company. It's quite large. It designs and manufactures, sells, and supports something I don't fully understand, right? Computer networking things. And Cisco is an amazing, it's an astounding example of a company that publishes the kind of content that we're speaking about. It accomplishes those 4 criteria. It's collaborative, the content is, it tells the brand story, it adds value, significant value to the lives of the customers, and it's multi-channel. So they have, listen to this, 300 YouTube channels. They're a global company, but still, right, 300 YouTube channels. They have 37 blogs, 100 Twitter feeds. Awesome, right? Here are some. My favorite one is the one for geeks. I don't understand it, but I feel like I'm participating in something important. And of course, they have a Facebook page, which last time I checked had 261,111 likes. Plus, listen to this. So yesterday, I was on the Facebook page, and this was the most recent post. Someone said, I am so in love with Cisco. Smile face. Thank you, Jesus. I mean, seriously, that is love. Thank you, Jesus, for Cisco. And I was on there. They have a social media page, which is part of their website, socialmedia.cisco.com, has the most current Twitter feeds. And there must be some conference in Europe, because there were things like, Cisco rocks. I love, Cisco's the greatest. That's pretty astounding. So I don't want to impress you just with the amount of content, but if you have a chance sometime, just take a look at the richness of it. This one blog post on the end there from February had 28,000 views. It had about 80 pingbacks and trackbacks. And it's written, first of all, by an incredibly important person, the VP of the Division of Video and Communities. Yeah, and that's important. And So it's incredibly well written. It's about a political issue, so it was addressing the European Union's court approving the merger of Microsoft and Skype, right? Affects their business, that is to say Cisco's business. They're afraid that this merger is going to cut them out of being able to support video communications. It's about video cloud stuff, right? So it's a hot technical topic, super important. The global media marketing team leader, one of the managers there, says this, that their social media efforts have engaged customers in a new way, extended the reach of traditional marketing, and reduced costs. And in a product launch that they facilitated almost exclusively in social media, they claim to have saved $100,000. And that's a big, well, you know, for a PM like me, that's a lot of money. Even for a corporation, I bet that that's quite a bit. Yeah, so let's move on to Chobani. Chobani, the yogurt company, you know Chobani? Right, in 2007, I know, it's so good. In 2007, they started making Greek yogurt in upstate New York. And there really hadn't been very much Greek yogurt available in the US, so it was pretty new. By 2010, Dannon and Yoplait had gotten wind of Chobani. And Chobani knew. They had not yet been really launched nationally, so Chobani thought they should go ahead and do this. But they also knew that they were up against a combined 100 years with, you know, Dannon and Yoplait together, 100 years plus 20 times the marketing budget. Right? Poor Chobani had 70 people working for them. So that they knew that they had to look at their efforts creatively in a new way from a different sort of perspective. They did some research, they did quite a lot of research actually, and they realized that the people who were early adopters of Chobani were saying pretty astounding things about the product. So the company decided that it wasn't going to advertise according to like health benefits. So Yoplait and Dannon was selling yogurt like it was medicine, all about the flora and such, right, in your digestive tract. So they decided that instead of going that way, they were going to have an effort that was what they called customer up, not consumer down. So they did things like this. They were crazy about what consumers were saying about their product. They were saying things like, I would leave my spouse for your yogurt, right? And maybe they were joking, but really maybe not. I mean, if you've had Chobani. So let me show you. This is Stephen, a medical student in upstate New York.
Hey everybody, my name is Stephen, and I am a huge Chobani lover. In fact, I am such a lover of Chobani that I rode my bike 80 miles just to see where Chobani is made. I battled some rain, some headwinds, some lack of directions, but eventually I made it. It was definitely worth it, and that is my love story for Chobani. I'm not a paid actor, I'm a real Chobani lover. And we want you guys to share your love for Chobani at Chobani.com right now.
You just can't pay for that kind of charm. So that's a real live fan, and they made these short 30-second TV spots with actual fans, not actors. They filmed the behind-the-scenes making of these commercials and launched that on YouTube, so all of us would know that how authentic it really was. This was a fully integrated campaign. It drove to the website, it drove to the Facebook page. They had billboards in all over the place that were tweets from real live fans, right? So there was one on Canal Street that said, Chobani nom nom nom, you know? And I just find that so funny. I mean, I would have been proud to have written that myself for Chobani nom nom nom, that's pretty good, right? But there's something even more engaging knowing that it was from Twitter handle, whatever it was. I mean, the handle was right there. I could tweet to that person and be like, hey, oh my God, I saw your billboard on Canal Street, that's so cool, right? You know, human beings want to do and have what other people with whom they identify have, right? And that drive actually is so strong that humans will believe things that other people believe, even if they have very strong evidence right in front of them to the contrary. Like, not just that there is contrary information, but that it's right here. They'll still believe what other people believe. And so all the better if they're believing something that's actually truthful. Yeah, and let me just note that Chobani, well, they had to pull the ads because they couldn't make enough yogurt, right? And, but they're still wildly active. They have a Chomobile that goes around and films people's love stories about Chobani. They also have an awesome Pinterest board. So Carla's going to say a word about that.
Well, yeah, just quickly. So Pinterest is hot, hot, hot right now. I know you know that, and they do an excellent job with their Pinterest. So they've got 11 different Pinterest boards, and what is interesting is the brand is using Pinterest to curate other content to build and grow its own brand. So they're linking to recipes on cookinglike.com. They've got a decor board, so they're even using style in associating with the brand, which I think is fascinating. So
what's the payoff of all of this? Certainly brand advocates are a payoff. So these are people like this lovely young woman who evangelize on your behalf. How handy, right? They actively promote the brand's products and services that they love. Right, here are a few more statistics that you might find interesting. This is data from 2011, but it's a January 2012 study that showed that 68% of internet users were making a recommendation, a product recommendation, at least once a month. That's quite a bit, 68%. And 12% make recommendations several times a week. So these brand advocates are big blabbermouths, la la la, and they're talking about why they love different brands. It's also the case that there's other advantages to rich content, right? So here's information from a 2011 study. It looked at 10 food and beverage and household brand sites, rather large sites that got about 100,000 visitors a month. And it showed that consumers who had logged into the website had an average spend in the brick and mortar store, right? And the brick and mortar store, that was 37% higher than non-visitors. So people who had been online went out of their homes, put on clothes, and went shopping, right? The visitors to brand websites spent more than 200% on the relevant products than non-visitors. And they spent, and the price per unit was about 2% higher than the norm. Right? So those are pretty significant results. A few other things that might interest you. Rich content. Right, can add value by more efficiently generating word of mouth buzz about your brand. It can yield a better ROI than traditional media. That's what Cisco found. It cultivates consumers who are really highly motivated to interact, to complete a sale, for example, to interact with other people on your behalf. It drives sales through customer reviews, and it can reduce costs like customer service costs. So the next question, of course, is how does one begin to develop rich content?
hopefully by now we've convinced you that rich content's important. I think it's only fair to say how do you make it and create it. So we just want to walk quickly a little bit through one of our approaches to creating of content and talk about what's different. So I think, you know, any project we've ever embarked on has some goals. It has some things we want to achieve. And we want to keep the objectives in mind. It puts a stake in the ground. What do we need to do? Why are we here? But also at the same time, when we start looking at a project, what's important is, of course, we start to look at the data. And you know, it doesn't really matter what data you've got. We really, really try not to underestimate looking broadly at what you've got. So whether you've got MP data or you have anecdotal stories, whether you have just done a comp shop or a store visit, or you're just trolling online, right? We're trying to look for information that provide clues. That's what we're looking for. Clues for perspective, right? When we have a new perspective, that's when we can start to think about things in a new way. And of course, the most important place that we're looking for clues are with consumers. So consumer insight is really, really important, as you know. However, you can't just take the insight and run with it. That is an interesting kind of learn that we've been seeing. So we have to take the consumer insights and we have to hold it up to the filter of the brand, right? What does the brand mean, and what does the brand require, demand, that we need to build in the hearts and the minds of consumers? And so typically we take these kinds of things into consideration and move forward. Interestingly, so Frito-Lay this is a nice case study in some respects, that they had a drop in sales of snacks, and they pretty much own the snack aisle, Frito-Lay. So their problem was gross sales. So they started looking at consumer insights, and it was really fascinating, because what they found was that not only were women, their primary demographic, not buying snacks, they were not even going down the snack aisle, right? So it wasn't a brand problem, it was like a category problem. And I just think that it's so helpful to take a step back and recast the problem in a new way. Once Frito-Lay realized that women weren't even going down the aisle, a shelf talker wasn't going to cut it, right? Like that wasn't the moment. The moment was, how can we take a step back and rethink the from the data and the insights, rethink of what is our problem, consider the consumer, and consider the culture. So women don't go down the snack aisle because they feel guilty about snacking. Women feel 4 times more guilty about snacking than men do. And that, I think, is a very interesting insight. And what we do with insights, little tidbits like that, is we use those insights to generate and look at the problem in a new perspective. So we look in a new perspective, and we can generate new ideas, new big ideas. And if, as a result of this talk, you think, I would really want to approach this from a rich content perspective, then you think about, I need rich ideas to generate content. And so the idea that instead of leaping to a tactic or leaping to a sales solution, we think about how can we actually engage with customers by creating content. We can really develop novel and new ways of participating in the culture. So what Frito-Lay did, which was so interesting, is that they had the courage to create new stories about their snacks. So there were, I think, 4 or 5 brands that all were going to work together to create this new approach to trying to solve the problem that women wouldn't even go down the snack aisle. And new approaches and creating new stories about the brand meant that they had to rethink where the brand was going to talk and what the channels were and how they were going to say it. So they came up with a comedic webisode series that they launched in conjunction with glam.com. So they had a partnership where their demographic was. They created this new content. They also published comic strips on a weekly basis on the blogs on glam.com. So they were trying to put as much content out there as possible. And that was how they addressed this kind of drop in sales in the aisle. And what's interesting to me, and I think everybody knows this, but it's so helpful because content can be leveraged across all channels in a way that just traditional identity elements don't work. Right? There's not enough richness and legs to them. But content, when you think about telling the brand story, using the identity system, of course, but with a deeper layer and level, you can tell it in store and you can tell it in home and out of home and online and all the different places that they have to be. This is an example that we did last year for Comply Foam Tips. Nobody's here? Okay. So Comply Foam Tips are foam tips that you put on the end of earphones to enhance the listening experience. And their target audience were audiophiles, people who love to listen to music, and people who really appreciate the music industry, and they are very in touch and tapped in. So what we did was we helped Comply by creating a community page on their website. This Live It, Play It, Share It space became a place that Comply could curate content. So they have music that they've picked that they're featuring so that you can listen and find new music to listen to. You can actually listen to music because they ported it into last.com. And they have a standing invitation to create videos, post them to YouTube, which they serve up on their site. And of course, their Twitter feed is there. So all in all, like lots of content on the site itself.
Yeah, just a few more words about Comply. I mean, it's an interesting case because it's an e-commerce site. But at the very highest level, the strategy for this content was to make sure that Comply was getting its portion of that $140 million beast, right? The audio file, who are sort of snobs, I have to say, about who they hang out with and who they associate with. So this space on their website was meant to be a hub of entertainment, of information, and most specifically of insider information. It was very important that we were conveying that. And it's also tactically kind of brilliant because these foam tips, I don't know if you use them, they wear out after about 3 months, right? So this sort of constant touch point with the customer by having this social hub on the site was really a good move for them. And it really was engaging. It's kind of funny. You could see on the last Twitter there, someone had said, clean my Comply tips, and some weird stuff came out, right? And Comply answered back, that gave us a good laugh. Yours are gross sometimes, aren't they? Yeah, it's just funny. So there's a really responsive, fun audience that associates itself now with Comply, and their sales are up. So in part due to the rich content. So one interesting thing about rich content is that it is complicated, right? It needs to be planned. That is to say, it has to have a strategy. You need to have a goal, which might be a campaign goal or a broader business goal, your business objectives, and you need to find a path toward that. So as a way of saying goodbye, we put together a little tool. It's in the back, I think in the back of your notebooks. A question set that you might like to consider when you're thinking about developing some rich content. So we hope you find it useful. We hope that it encourages you to go ahead and feed the beast and to feed it really, really well. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much.